The story of James Pearson Beckwourth begins long before anyone called him a hero, a warrior, or a legend. It begins in a quiet corner of Virginia in the year 1798, inside a world divided by chains, power, and dreams. At that time, the American West was still wild, untamed, and full of danger. But James did not know any of that yet. He was just a child, born into a life that tried to limit him before he even took his first breath. James was the son of a black enslaved woman and a white enslaver, truth that shaped his early life but never defined his destiny. Even as a small boy, people noticed something different in him. There was a strong fire inside him, a restlessness, a spirit that refused to be trapped. James was not born into freedom, but he was born with the heart of a free man. He grew up watching the world around him with sharp eyes. He saw how people were treated. He saw what fear looked like, but he also saw courage. He watched other enslaved people hold on to hope, even in the darkest moments. Those early images taught him something important. Freedom is worth fighting for, and a person must decide who they are, no matter where they start. When James was still young, his father chose to free him legally. This single moment, simple on paper, life-changing in reality, opened the door to a world James had only dreamed about. For the first time, he was no longer property. He was a man. But freedom alone was not enough for him. He wanted something more. He wanted purpose, adventure, and a destiny he could shape with his own hands. As a teenager, James tried working as a blacksmith. He learned quickly, hammering hot metal, shaping tools, and building strength. But even while sparks flew in the workshop, his mind drifted far away. Every blow of the hammer echoed a calling deep inside him. He wanted to travel. He wanted to see mountains. He wanted to walk into the unknown and test himself against a larger world. One day, he made his decision. He packed what little he had and walked away from the life he knew. He had no map, no promise of safety, no guarantee of success. All he had was courage and the belief that his future was somewhere far beyond the horizon. This was the first major turning point in his life, the moment he chose the road of adventure. As he traveled west, the land changed around him. Forests thinned, rivers widened. The sky opened up, stretching farther than he had ever seen. Every mile felt like a step into his true self. By the time he reached St. Louis, busy frontier city filled with traders, hunters, soldiers, and dreamers, James knew he had found the place where legends were born. It was in St. Louis that James heard the stories of the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, led by the famous General William Ashley. These men were called mountain men. They crossed dangerous rivers, climbed freezing mountains, fought wild animals, and lived among native tribes. To James, they were not just adventurers. They were living proof that a person could carve their own path in a world full of limits. James felt drawn to that life instantly. He walked into the company camp, stood tall, and offered his strength, courage, and willingness to learn. And just like that, he became part of a group that would shape his destiny forever. Life as a mountain man was not easy. Each day tested him. The winters were brutal. The summers were unforgiving. Food was often scarce, and danger was everywhere. But James never complained. He learned fast. He studied the land, its rivers, its tracks, its storms. He learned to trap beavers, hunt buffalo, and survive in conditions that would break ordinary men. Soon, the other mountain men began to notice him. He was strong, fearless, and clever. He could read nature like a book. He could sense danger before anyone else. In time, they trusted him with harder missions, long hunts, scouting trips, and journeys deep into unexplored territories. James loved it all. He felt alive in the wilderness. The wind, the mountains, the open sky, they gave him something society never had: respect. In the wilderness, a man was judged by his skill, his courage, and his heart. And by those measures, James was equal to any of them. But destiny is never simple. While crossing the northern plains one season, James' life took an unexpected turn. During a fierce encounter, he was separated from his group and captured by warriors of the Crow Nation. Many men in his situation did not survive such encounters. But James was not like most men. When the Crow warriors looked into his eyes, they did not see fear. They saw strength, they saw spirit, and they saw potential. Instead of killing him, they brought him into their camp. They observed him. They tested him. They tried to understand him. This moment this unbelievable twist of fate would become the most important turning point of his entire life. Because James Beck was not simply destined to survive among the Crow, he was destined to rise. When the Crow warriors first brought James Beckwourth into their camp, no one knew what would happen next, not the warriors, not the elders, and certainly not James himself. The Crow were powerful, respected, and feared across the plains. They had their own laws, their own ways, and their own sense of honor. A captured man was often considered an enemy, but James was different. The Crow saw something in him that made them pause. At first, they watched him closely. They expected fear, confusion, or weakness. But James showed none of that. He stood tall. He looked them in the eyes. He did not beg. He did not break. His calmness surprised them. His confidence challenged them. Even though he did not speak their language yet, his spirit spoke for him. Days passed. The warriors tested him. They wanted to see what kind of man he was. They gave him tasks, small things at first, then harder ones. They watched how he worked, how he handled pressure, how he reacted when they pushed him. James accepted everything with quiet strength. He did what they asked, without hesitation. Soon, the Crow began to speak among themselves. This man was brave. He was strong. He was patient. He did not act like a typical captive. There was dignity in the way he held himself. Dignity they respected. Eventually, the tribe made a decision that would change James' life forever. Instead of treating him as an enemy, they chose to treat him as one of their own. They adopted him into the tribe, giving him a place, a role, and a future. This was not something they did often. Adoption meant trust. It meant hope. And now, for the first time, James had a new family. Life among the Crow was unlike anything he had known before. Their villages were full of movement, sound, and color. Children laughed and played. Elders told stories around the fire. Warriors practiced their skills and prepared for hunts. Women crafted clothing, prepared food, and shaped the daily rhythm of the community. James watched, listened, and learned. He began to study their language, repeating words slowly at first, then faster as he understood more. He learned their customs, the rules of respect, the places of honor, the rituals of war and peace. The Crow did not force him to change. They simply allowed him to grow, and he grew quickly. He learned to ride horses, the Crow wavered back, fast, and with incredible control. He learned how they hunted, how they tracked animals, how they moved silently across the plains. Their skills impressed him, pushed him, and inspired him to become better. With time, James made friends among the warriors. One of them, a young fighter named Bear became especially close. They trained together, laughed together, and trusted each other. Bear taught James the stories of the Crow, the history of their people, and the importance of courage. In return, James shared his own experiences, the mountains he had crossed, the storms he had survived, the life he had lived before he arrived. The tribe began to see James not as an outsider, but as a valuable member of their world. His sharp instincts, his calm nature, and his ability to adapt made him stand out. When the tribe needed someone to assist in a hunt, they called on him. When they needed a scout to watch for danger, they trusted him. Bit by bit, James earned respect the same way he always had, through his actions. One evening, after a successful hunt, the tribe gathered around a large fire. The air was cool. The stars hung bright above the plains. Elders spoke of bravery, of honor, and of the responsibilities of those who fight for the tribe. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the elders pointed to James. He spoke slowly, clearly, so everyone could hear. "This man," the elder said, "has shown the heart of a Crow. He has stood strong when others would fall. He has given his strength to this tribe, and he has earned a place among us." James felt the weight of those words. Acceptance, belonging, identity. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never fully known. But the journey was not over. The Crow Nation lived in constant conflict with rival tribes, especially the Blackfeet. Raids, battles, and ambushes were a regular part of life. The plains were beautiful, but they were dangerous. Every warrior had to be ready. James understood this reality. He knew that if he wanted to truly stand with the Crow, he would one day have to fight beside them. Soon. That day arrived. A warning came from the scouts. Blackfeet warriors had been seen near the hunting grounds. Tension spread through the camp. Women gathered children. Warriors prepared their weapons. Horses were brought forward. James stood among them, calm and focused. He felt fear, but he refused to show it. Bear Runner walked up to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and nodded. "You stand with us," he said, and James did. The battle that followed would test everything he had learned: his courage, his skill, his loyalty. The clash was fierce. The cries of warriors echoed across the plains. Arrows flew. Horses thundered through dust. Steel met flesh. Strength met strength. In the chaos, James proved himself. He fought with heart, with purpose, with a bravery that surprised even the seasoned warriors. By the time the battle ended, the Crow had driven their enemies away, and James had taken his first step toward becoming a leader. The warriors gave him a new name, one that spoke of courage and respect. It was a moment he would never forget. James Beckwourth, once a captive, was now a warrior, and his greatest rise was still ahead. After the battle with the Blackfeet, everything changed for James Beckwourth. The Crow warriors no longer saw him as the newcomer, the outsider, or the strange man who had once been captured. They now saw him as a warrior, someone who had stood beside them when danger came, someone who had risked his life for the safety of the tribe. Yet, even with this new respect, James felt something deeper happening inside him. He could feel himself becoming part of something bigger, part of a community, a brotherhood, a way of life that had reshaped him from the inside out. He was no longer simply living among the Crow. He was becoming Crow. In the weeks after the battle, James continued to train with the warriors. They showed him how to move silently through tall grass, how to read the tracks of buffalo, and how to sense danger before it showed itself. He absorbed everything like a sponge. Every lesson made him stronger. Every mistake made him better. One morning, the tribe prepared for a major buffalo hunt. This was not only about food, it was a sacred act, a tradition that required skill, teamwork, and courage. The whole village came alive with excitement. Horses were painted with symbols of luck and protection. Warriors checked their weapons, bows, arrows, lances, and knives. James joined the group of hunters, his heart steady. He rode beside Bear Runner, who had become like a brother to him. The open plains stretched out endlessly before them, swaying in the wind like a golden sea. Somewhere ahead, a huge herd of buffalo waited. To the Crow, the buffalo were not just animals. They were life itself, providing meat, skins, tools, and strength. When the hunters reached the herd, the ground trembled. Hundreds of buffaloes stood together, massive and powerful. The warriors spread out, forming a wide circle. Then, with a shout, they rushed forward. The chase exploded across the plains, hooves pounding, dust rising, horses leaping over rough ground. James felt the thrill surge through him. He leaned low on his horse, guiding it with his knees. He moved through the chaos with surprising ease, his mind focused. When he finally closed in on a buffalo, he lifted his weapon and struck with precision. The animal fell, and for a moment, everything went quiet except the echo of the hunt in his chest. When it was over, the tribe honored the buffalo with a ceremony. James stood among the warriors, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. He felt pride, not because he had hunted well, but because he had taken part in something sacred, something that connected him more deeply to the Crow. As months passed, James' reputation grew. He became known for his sharp eyesight, his fast decisions, and his ability to remain calm when dangers multiplied. When the tribe prepared for raids or defenses, they included him naturally. He was no longer the man they observed out of curiosity. He had become a true protector of the people. But life on the plains was never calm for long. Rival tribes continued to challenge the Crow. Some wanted hunting grounds. Others sought revenge for past battles. The Blackfeet, especially, were constant threats. One cold morning, scouts returned to the village with urgent news. A group of Blackfeet warriors had been spotted near a river, where Crow families gathered water daily. This was not a random sighting. It was a warning. Something was coming. The chiefs gathered their warriors and prepared to defend their people. James was among them. He stood with his bow ready, his mind sharp. He remembered the first battle, how much he had feared, how hard he had fought, how his life had changed since that moment. Now, he felt different. Now, he felt ready. The Crow moved silently through the trees near the riverbank. The sound of running water covered their steps. Suddenly, the enemy appeared, slipping out of the shadows. Their faces were fierce. Their weapons gleamed. The fight broke out instantly. Arrows whistled through the air. Warriors clashed at close range. Horses screamed. The river churned with splashes and shouts. James fought with complete focus. Every move he made came from instinct, ducking, striking, protecting those beside him. He saw a bear runner in danger and rushed to his side, blocking an attack that could have been deadly. The battle was intense, but the Crow stood together, strong and unbreakable. Eventually, the Blackfeet retreated, disappearing back into the wilderness. When the fight ended, the Crow warriors looked at James with admiration. He had not only fought bravely, he had saved lives. Later that night, the elders met again. They spoke of honor, strength, and leadership qualities that mattered more than birth or blood. They spoke of the warrior who had come from another world, yet fought with the soul of a Crow. And then, in a ceremony held under the open sky, surrounded by firelight and the steady beating of drums, they made an announcement. James Beckwourth was no longer simply a warrior. He was now a rising leader. They gave him an honored place among the warriors. They recognized his courage and dedication, and they blessed the path ahead of him, a path that would lead him not only into battle, but into history. From that night on, James walked with the confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. He was no longer the freed boy searching for destiny. He was a man of the Crow Nation, a protector, a symbol of strength, a story in the making. But destiny was far from finished with him. The greatest battles, the greatest challenges, and the greatest triumphs were still yet to come. As time passed, James Beckwourth's presence among the Crow grew stronger. The people trusted him. The warriors respected him. The elders saw something powerful inside him, something rare, something steady, something that didn't fade when life became dangerous. They saw leadership, but leadership among the Crow was not given easily. It was not about words or pride. It was earned through courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand for the tribe, even when death waited on the other side of the horizon. James understood this, and he carried each responsibility with care. He woke before sunrise, trained with the younger warriors, studied the land, and listened to the elders. He learned not only their ways of fighting, but also their ways of thinking. A strong warrior could win a battle, but a wise warrior could save a nation. One afternoon, while the tribe was preparing for a long journey to follow migrating buffalo herds, trouble appeared again. A group of Crow scouts returned with grim news. A large band of Blackfeet warriors had been moving closer to Crow territory. They were well armed, aggressive, and known for sudden attacks. The Crow chiefs met in a large lodge to decide the next steps. The fire crackled softly as men with years of experience spoke, argued, and planned. James sat among them, no longer as an outsider, but as a trusted voice. The chiefs debated whether they should confront the Blackfeet or move the camp to safer ground. Some believed the tribe should avoid conflict. Others felt that showing fear would invite even greater danger. James listened until the room grew quiet. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and thoughtful. He explained that the Blackfeet were becoming bold because they believed the Crow were vulnerable. Moving away would not solve the problem, it would only delay it. Instead, he suggested sending a small, skilled group of warriors to track the Blackfeet's movements and understand their intentions. Not a full attack, not a retreat. A smart, careful step. The chiefs looked at him with interest. His idea was balanced, strategic, and wise. It showed strength without recklessness. After a moment, the head chief nodded. James would lead the scouting group. That night, as James prepared for the mission, Bear Runner joined him. The two men sat quietly near a fire, sharpening their weapons, checking their horses, and thinking about what lay ahead. Bear Runner broke the silence. "You speak like an elder," he said with a grin. "Soon you will be leading us all." James shook his head lightly. "I speak only what I feel is right," he replied. "Leadership is not a crown. It is a burden." Bear Runner smiled again, impressed. He knew James was different, someone shaped by hardship, sharpened by survival, and lifted by purpose. At dawn, James and a small band of 10 skilled warriors set out across the plains. The sky was cool, painted with soft colors as the sun slowly rose. Their horses moved quietly through tall grass. Every sense was alert. The land was open and beautiful, but it could hide danger anywhere. For 3 days, the group tracked faint signs, hoofprints, broken branches, ashes from old fires. James studied each clue carefully. He had learned to read the land almost as well as any crow-born warrior. The tracks told a story. The Blackfeet were not simply passing through, they were preparing for something. On the fourth morning, the scouting party reached a high ridge. Below them, hidden in a valley, was a Blackfeet encampment. Dozens of warriors, many horses, weapons stacked neatly, fires burning low. A war party large and organized. James knew what this meant. The Blackfeet were planning an attack, likely on a village or a hunting group. If the Crow didn't act quickly, lives would be lost. The warriors looked to James. They trusted him, not because of where he was born, but because of who he had become. James thought carefully. A head-on attack would be suicide, but returning to the village without disturbing the Blackfeet could buy the Crow enough time to prepare. He ordered the warriors to retreat silently. They moved like shadows, leaving no trace behind. But fate rarely gives easy choices. As the group descended the ridge, a small Blackfeet scouting pair spotted them. A sharp cry cut through the air in alarm. The Blackfeet scouts charged down the hill, weapons ready. James reacted instantly. He motioned for his men to spread out. The clash was fast and fierce. One Blackfeet scout fell, but the second escaped. Riding hard toward the main camp, James knew the message was clear. The Crow had been discovered. The Crow scouts raced home at full speed. They rode through day and night, pushing their horses to the limit. When they reached the village, James gathered the chiefs and elders. He explained everything: the size of the enemy, their location, their purpose, and the urgency of the threat. This time, no one questioned him. The Crow prepared for defense, fortifying the village, organizing warriors, guiding families to safe areas. James helped plan every detail. His calm leadership steadied the tribe. His clear thinking saved valuable time. 2 days later, the Blackfeet arrived, expecting to ambush an unprepared village. Instead, they found a strong wall of Crow warriors ready to fight. The battle exploded with thunder and chaos, but the Crow held firm. They fought together with precision and courage. James moved through the fight like a force of nature, protecting, coordinating, inspiring. His presence strengthened the warriors around him. When the final clash faded and the enemy retreated, the Crows stood victorious. They had been saved not by luck, but by strategy and courage. That night, the tribe held a council of honor. Warriors danced. Elders thanked the spirits. People celebrated survival. The head chief stood before James. "You did not become Crow by blood," he said. "You became Crow by heart, and tonight you became more." The firelight flickered across James' face as the chief's voice rose. "From this day, you will stand not only as a warrior, but as a leader of our people." Cheers filled the night. James Beckwourth had risen again this time into the early steps of true greatness, but destiny was still carving a larger story for him, one that would echo far beyond the plains. The rise of James Beckwourth did not slow down after the battle. In fact, it was only the beginning. The Crow Nation had seen his courage, felt his leadership, and witnessed the way he guided them through danger with steady hands and a fearless heart. Word spread through the village, then through the hunting grounds, then through distant camps. James was not just a brave warrior, he was becoming something greater. But becoming a Crow leader was not a simple path. Leadership in the tribe had deep roots. It came from honor, wisdom, and a lifetime of service. The elders watched James closely. The warriors measured him not only in battle but in calm moments: how he spoke, how he listened, how he treated the young and the old. Every action mattered, and James never disappointed. He lived with humility. He helped families build shelters. He guided young boys learning to hunt. He sat with the elders at night, listening to stories, learning the history of the people who had become his family. He was hungry for knowledge, not for fame. This humility, this quiet strength made the tribe respect him even more. But the plains were never peaceful for long. One summer morning, news arrived that chilled everyone. A small Crow hunting group had disappeared near the foothills. No signals, no tracks, no sign of life. The disappearance was strange, even for the dangerous plains. The chiefs feared the worst. They knew the Blackfeet were always watching, waiting for moments of weakness. The tribe gathered for a council. The air was heavy with worry. Mothers held their children close. Elders whispered prayers. Warriors stood with tightened jaws, ready for whatever might come. James stepped forward. His voice was serious but calm. He explained that the missing group might still be alive. The silence, he said, could mean they were being held or tracked. The tribe needed answers before panic spread. He offered to lead a search party, small, fast, careful, and determined. The chiefs agreed. Within an hour, James and a group of 12 skilled warriors rode out of the village. Bear Runner was beside him, as loyal as always. The wind swept across the tall grass as they pushed forward. The sun climbed higher. Time felt sharp and urgent, following faint signs, broken plants, disturbed soil, faded hoofprints. They eventually found traces of a struggle, blood, footsteps, drag marks. The signs pointed toward a narrow canyon. James studied the land. This was not a random attack. It was a setup. The Blackfeet were using the canyon as a trap. He ordered his men to move quietly, staying low behind rocks and bushes. Every step felt heavy with danger. The canyon walls rose steeply on both sides, creating shadows that could hide enemies. Inside the canyon, they found what they feared: the missing crow hunters tied near a rock formation. They were alive, but weak and guarded by a Blackfeet war party. James took a deep breath. The next moments would decide everything. He whispered instructions to the warriors. They spread out silently. They moved like the wind, no sound, no hesitation. When the moment came, James signaled the attack. The battle erupted fast. James charged forward first, driving back the nearest guard. The Crow warriors followed, fighting with fierce energy. Arrows flew, blades clashed, voices echoed against the walls. The Blackfeet fought hard, but the ambush turned against them when James' group struck from multiple angles. Within minutes, it was over. The captured Crow hunters were freed. Some were injured, but all were alive. Relief washed through the canyon like a warm wave as they rode home with the rescued men. The entire tribe rushed out to greet them. Mothers cried, warriors cheered, elders raised their arms to the sky. James looked at the scene quietly, humbled but proud. But this rescue was more than a victory. It was a turning point. Later that night, a giant council fire burned in the center of the village. The drums beat slowly at first, then faster. Warriors danced, celebrating both survival and strength. The head chief rose and motioned for silence. He spoke to the tribe, his voice deep and steady. He told them that leadership was not only about bravery in battle, but about protecting the weak, thinking with wisdom, and giving everything for the tribe. He said James had shown all these qualities not once, not twice, but every time the tribe needed him. Then the chief turned to James. The entire crowd fell silent. "You have fought for us," the chief said. "You have bled for us. You have saved our sons, our brothers, and our hunters. You have shown the spirit of a true Crow leader." The fire crackled loudly in the silence that followed. Then the chief spoke the words that would change James' life forever. From this night forward, James Beckwourth will stand as a war chief of the Crow Nation. The people erupted in cheers. Warriors lifted their weapons to the sky. Drums thundered like rolling storms. Even the youngest children understood the importance of this moment. James was overwhelmed. He had been a slave. He had been a wanderer. He had been a mountain man. And now he stood as a war chief among one of the strongest nations on the plains. He looked around the circle of firelight, the warriors, the elders, the families, and he felt something powerful settle inside him. He belonged. This was not a title made of pride. It was a responsibility made of devotion. As the celebration continued deep into the night, James understood something clearly. His life was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting a people, guiding them, and standing between them and danger. And the dangers ahead would soon test him more than ever before. Becoming war chief changed James Beckwourth's life in ways he could never have imagined. The position brought honor, responsibility, and respect, but it also brought a new level of pressure. The tribe now depended on him to protect them in times of danger, guide them in difficult seasons, and make choices that affected every family. Yet even in the middle of this heavy responsibility, James found something unexpected among the Crow-love. In the weeks following his rise as war chief, James grew close to a young Crow woman named Medicine Cloud. She was strong, calm, and wise beyond her years. She cared deeply for her people and carried a quiet strength that reminded James of the women he had admired growing up. She offered him not only companionship but also peace, something he had rarely known in his wandering life. Medicine Cloud understood him in a way few others did. She saw both the warrior and the man inside him. James, who had spent so many years fighting, traveling, and searching, finally felt rooted. They would sit by the river at sunset, letting the cool air wrap around them as they talked about the future. She told him stories of the Crow ancestors, and James shared moments from his past moments of hardship, freedom, and discovery. Their bond grew naturally, and soon they were married in a traditional Crow ceremony. The tribe celebrated them with dancing, gifts, and blessings. James felt happy in a deep, comforting way. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving, he was building something lasting. But peace never stayed long on the plains. One early autumn morning, as the tribe prepared to move their camp toward winter grounds, tragedy struck. A group of warriors returned from hunting with devastating news. A rival tribe had attacked a small Crow family traveling behind the main group. The attack was quick and brutal. 2 were killed, and 1 young boy had gone missing. The tribe was shaken. Mothers cried, warriors clenched their fists, and elders prayed for guidance. As war chief, James had to act immediately. He gathered 20 skilled fighters, including Bear Runner, and set out to track the attackers. James felt a heavy pressure in his chest, not only as a leader, but as a man who loved his people like family. The group rode fast across the plains. James moved ahead, studying tracks, marking clues, and following signs the attackers tried to hide. They crossed cold rivers, narrow ridges, and open valleys. The missing boy's life depended on their speed. On the second day, they found the attackers' trail leading into a dense forest near the base of the mountains. The forest was dark and quiet, the kind of place where sound traveled strangely and danger hid behind every shadow. James signaled his warriors to move silently inside the forest. They finally found the enemy camp, a small group of warriors gathered around fires, unaware of the danger approaching. Near one of the fires sat the missing boy, tied but alive. James felt relief, but he knew the rescue would require speed and precision. One mistake could cost the child's life. He gathered his men and whispered the plan. They would strike fast. James and Bear Runner would move toward the boy, while the others created a distraction on the opposite side. When the moment came, James moved like a shadow. Bear Runner followed, stepping lightly between trees. The attack erupted suddenly as Crow warriors stormed in from the far side of the camp. James rushed to the boy, cutting the ropes with quick, steady hands. As he lifted the child, a warrior charged toward him with a raised spear. Bear Runner intercepted the attack, blocking it with his shield and countering with a powerful strike. The 2 warriors locked in a fierce struggle. James shielded the boy as more enemies approached. He fought with calm focus, protecting the child with every move. The battle raged around them, shouts, clashing weapons, cracking branches. Finally, after long, tense minutes, the forest grew still. The enemy lay defeated. The child was safe. But the victory carried a cost. Bear Runner had suffered a deep wound. James rushed to him, fear tightening his chest. Bear Runner tried to smile, but the pain was clear. James knelt beside him, gripping his hand. "You saved us," James said quietly. Bear Runner shook his head. "We saved each other." The warriors carried him back toward the village, doing their best to keep him alive. Medicine Cloud and the tribe's healers worked tirelessly through the night, using herbs, warm cloths, and prayers. But the wound was too deep. Just before dawn, Bear Runner took his final breath. The village mourned deeply. Bear Runner had been more than a warrior. He had been a friend, a brother, a hero. James felt the loss like a blade to the heart. Bear Runner had stood beside him since the early days, had fought for him, had trusted him. Now he was gone. The tribe held a ceremony to honor Bear Runner's spirit. Drums echoed across the plains, voices lifted in sorrow, and warriors spoke of his bravery. James stood silently, his heart heavy. He understood that leadership demanded great strength, but it also brought great pain. In the days that followed, Medicine Cloud stayed by James' side. She reminded him that Bear Runner's spirit lived on in every victory James achieved. Every life he protected, every choice he made for the good of the tribe. Through this dark moment, James realized something powerful. Leadership was not just about strategy or strength. It was about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. He promised himself the memory of Bear Runner that he would continue to lead with courage and heart, but challenges were still coming. Bigger, harder, and life-changing. The plains were shifting, new dangers were rising, and James Beckwourth's destiny was about to take another dramatic turn. The seasons changed, and life in the Crow Nation moved forward. But for James Beckwourth, a quiet shift had begun inside his heart. He still fought for the Crow, still led them with honor, and still loved Medicine Cloud deeply. Yet something else was growing, a restless feeling, the same feeling he had known as a younger man. It was the pull of the unknown, the whisper of distant lands, the call of a new destiny. James hid this feeling for a long time. He did not want to abandon the people who had accepted him, raised him, and trusted him. But every night, when he looked at the horizon, he felt something stirring. The world was changing fast. New settlers, travelers, and explorers were pushing west from the big cities. The land was shifting under new footsteps, new ambitions, and new opportunities. James felt it, like wind blowing before a storm. One evening, James sat with Medicine Cloud near the river. The water glowed under the fading sun. She noticed a distant look in his eyes. "You are thinking of another road," she said softly. James sighed. He did not want to lie. "The world is opening. I want to see what lies beyond the plains. I want to explore new lands, learn new paths, and find places no one has seen." Medicine Cloud looked down for a moment. Then, with deep understanding, she nodded. "Your spirit was born to move," she said. "You followed the path the Great Spirit placed in your heart. I will not hold you back." Her words were full of strength, not sadness. She knew James loved the tribe, but she also knew his destiny was bigger than one place. The Crow believed that every person had a path written for them. James' path now stretched beyond the village, beyond the plains, beyond the mountains. Soon after, he said farewell to the tribe with honor and respect. Warriors embraced him. Elders blessed him. Children stared at him with wide eyes, watching a legend ride away. James looked back one last time, his heart heavy yet hopeful. Then he began the long journey west. The land grew wilder as he traveled. Thick forests, steep ridges, deep valleys, and endless rivers covered the land like a giant, ancient maze. James loved it. Every new challenge sharpened his instincts. Every mountain pushed him to climb higher. Every roar of a distant river reminded him why he loved exploring. Eventually, he reached the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains. These mountains were tall, cold, and dangerous. Many travelers avoided them, calling them impossible to cross. But James saw something else possibility. He studied the land carefully. For weeks he moved through narrow paths, climbed rocky slopes, slept in freezing nights, and traced the shape of the mountains. He noticed patterns. He noticed gaps. And slowly, he realized something extraordinary. There was a hidden passageway, gentle and safer than the deadly routes travelers feared. A path that could lead thousands of settlers into California without the risk of crossing deadly peaks. This discovery was huge. James rode the entire length of the pass, marking every curve and opening. At every high point, he imagined wagon trains moving through. Families, hunters, dreamers, prospectors heading toward the goldfields. He could see it all clearly. This was not just a discovery. This was a gateway. Later, history would call it Beckwourth Pass, named after the man who saw what others could not. But at that moment, James was simply proud. He knew this path could save lives. People had died trying to cross the Sierra Nevada. His discovery could change that. It could bring hope where there was fear. James did not stop there. He built a ranch near the pass, a safe stop for travelers. It became known as Beckwourth Ranch. There, he offered food, shelter, and guidance. He told people about the pass, drew maps in the dirt, pointed to the horizon, and said, "Take this road. It will lead you safely." Travelers trusted him. He had the look of a man who knew what he was talking about. And soon, word spread. Hundreds began using his route. Then thousands, wagons rolled across the plains. Horses carried families toward dreams of gold and opportunity. travelers blessed James Beckwourth's name as they passed through the mountains. Alive and well, he had once saved the Crow tribe from a deadly ambush. Now, he was saving countless strangers from deadly mountains. Through all this, James stayed humble. When someone asked how he discovered the pass, he simply smiled and said, by following the land where it wanted to go. But the truth was deeper. James understood the earth the way some people understand music. He could feel the shape of the land, sense its safest roots, and read the ground like a book. His years as a mountain man and Crow warrior had sharpened his instincts beyond normal understanding. As the gold rush exploded in California, Beckwourth Pass became even more important. People rushed west in a frenzy. Many lives were saved because James opened the doorway. Some travelers had lost everything, yet when they reached his ranch, they found kindness and guidance. He fed the hungry, he sheltered the tired, he warned the reckless, and sometimes he told stories of battles, hunts, storms, friendships, and the mighty Crow Nation. Travelers sat around his fire, listening in awe to the man who had lived 3 lifetimes in one. But this new chapter also brought challenges. The West was changing fast. More people meant more conflict, more greed, more tension between settlers and native tribes. James often found himself caught between 2 worlds, trying to help newcomers survive, while also respecting the land and the people who had taught him so much. Still, his discovery remained one of the greatest achievements of his life. Beckwourth Pass was more than a traillet, was a symbol of his vision and courage. James Beckwourth, once a child born into slavery, once a mountain man surviving the wild, once a war chief among the Crow, had now become a pathfinder for an entire nation. But his journey was far from over. New adventures, new dangers, new decisions, all of them waited just beyond the horizon. Years passed while travelers continued to cross the Sierra Nevada through the trail James Beckwourth had discovered. Beckwourth Pass became a lifeline for settlers racing toward California, and Beckwourth Ranch turned into a reliable place of rest for thousands. Every day brought new faces, miners hoping for gold, families searching for a new beginning, soldiers, traders, and wanderers from faraway lands. James welcomed them with warm food, a safe place to camp, and often a story that held their attention like magic. Around his fire, he spoke with a calm voice, but every word carried the power of a man who had lived through storms, battles, and miracles. To the tired travelers sitting under the night sky, he was not just a guide, he was a storyteller, someone who had seen more of the world than they could imagine. People listened to him with wide eyes, as he described chasing buffalo across the plains, surviving bitter winters in the Rocky Mountains, and standing shoulder to shoulder with the Crow Nation in fierce battles. He told them about his friendship with warriors, about sacred ceremonies, about the quiet wisdom of the elders, and about the love he once found under the Crow sky. Some stories were short and simple. Others were long and filled with danger and triumph. But every story had the same effect. It made people forget their tiredness, their fear, their hunger. They leaned closer to the fire, pulled their blankets tight, and let James' voice carry them into worlds they had never known. Eventually, word of his storytelling traveled as far as his mountain pass. In 1855, a man named Thomas D. Bonner arrived at Beckwourth Ranch. Bonner was a writer, always searching for strong tales and memorable characters. When he heard James speak, he knew he had found something special. After dinner one night, he approached James. "Your life," Bonner said, "is a book waiting to be written." James laughed, brushing off the idea at first. He had never thought of himself as someone who needed a book. He lived his stories. He didn't sit down and write them. But Bonner insisted. He explained that the world needed to hear the truth about the West, about the Crow, about the way. James had lived 3 different lives: slave, mountain man, and war chief. In time, James agreed. Every day, he sat with Bonner and shared memories from his wild, unpredictable journey. Bonner wrote everything down, hundreds of pages, filled with danger, adventure, heartbreak, triumph, and the spirit of the frontier. James spoke honestly, confidently, and sometimes with dramatic flair. He knew how to hold attention, and Bonner captured that power in his writing. When the book was completed, it was titled The Life and Adventures of James P. Beckwourth. It was unlike anything people had read before. Readers were shocked, excited, and fascinated. They read about a man born enslaved who had climbed mountains, survived near-death battles, traveled through unexplored lands, lived with the Crow Nation, and risen to become a respected war chief. Some people believed every word. Others thought some stories were too extraordinary to be true. But that was the nature of James Beckwourth. He lived a life so big, so wild, so unpredictable, that it stretched the boundaries of imagination. Some critics claimed he exaggerated. Others argued that even if he did, it didn't matter, because the truth was already more astounding than anything he could invent. But James did not worry about critics. He only cared that the world understood a little more about the frontier he had lived in, the people he loved, and the strength it had taken to survive. His book spread his name across America. People in cities who had never seen a mountain, never touched a horse, never smelled campfire smoke, now knew the name James P. Beckwourth. They spoke about him in saloons, in parlors, and in military outposts. His stories became part of Western legend. Yet fame did not change him. He continued to explore. He continued to help travelers. He continued to serve as an interpreter for native tribes, trying to keep peace between cultures that misunderstood each other. But with more settlers pouring west, tensions grew heavier every year. The land was shrinking under the pressure of expansion. Native tribes struggled to keep their lands, traditions, and freedom. Conflicts erupted frequently, and governments began pushing tribes from their homes. James often found himself standing between two worlds. He loved the native communities he respected, and the American settlers who trusted his guidance. It was a painful place to stand, especially as the world changed faster than anyone expected. Still, he continued to use his skills to bridge the gap. He worked as a scout for the U.S. Army, helping soldiers understand the land and negotiate with native tribes. He worked to prevent violence when he could, but sometimes conflict was unavoidable. These years weighed heavily on him, leaving him thoughtful, quieter, and more reflective. Yet whenever he returned to Beckwourth Ranch, the old spark would return. Travelers would gather, hoping to hear stories. Children would ask questions about buffalo, eagles, and warriors. Young men would ask how to survive in the mountains. And James, with a thoughtful smile, would sit by the fire and begin once again. It was a cold winter, and the wind nearly cut a man in half. Travelers loved his stories. Writers loved his stories. Even history loved his stories. Because through every tale, no matter how incredible, James shared something real. The heart of the American frontier. He had lived through loss and victory, fear and courage, darkness and hope. His life was not only a story, it was a symbol of resilience, strength, and transformation. But as the world around him changed rapidly, one final chapter was waiting, a chapter that would test him once more and lead him toward the closing days of a life larger than legend. As the years moved forward, the world around James Beckwourth changed faster than he ever imagined. The frontier he once knew wild, open, and full of mystery was disappearing. Towns grew where buffalo once roamed. Roads cut across quiet valleys. More wagons rolled west, carrying families, soldiers, prospectors, and dreamers. The land that had shaped James was becoming something new. James watched all of this with mixed feelings. He understood progress, but he also understood loss. He saw tribes forced from their ancestral lands. He saw conflicts rise where once there had been peace. He saw the balance between man and nature shift in ways that troubled him. Still, he continued to serve as he always had, standing between worlds. He worked as a scout for the U.S. Army, guiding soldiers through difficult terrain, helping them understand the land, and acting as an interpreter with native tribes. His knowledge was unmatched. His instincts were sharp. Even in his later years, he rode with a confidence that younger scouts admired. But these years were not as simple as his days with the Crow. Many times, James found himself torn. He understood the native tribes. He respected their way of life. He had lived among them, loved among them, and risen to leadership among them. But he also understood the settlers and soldiers who depended on him for survival. He knew their fears and their hopes. Walking between these two worlds was painful. Some native people saw him as a bridge. Others saw him as a man caught in an impossible position. Some soldiers respected him. Others did not trust a man with deep ties to the tribes. James carried all of this quietly. He never complained. He simply did his job guiding, translating, helping, and trying, whenever possible, to prevent bloodshed. During one of these years, he joined a group of soldiers sent to negotiate peace with a Plains tribe. The tension was thick. One wrong word could spark disaster. But James stepped forward with calmness in his voice and wisdom in his eyes. He spoke slowly, clearly, respectfully, first in English, then in the tribe's language. He explained each side's fears, each side's hopes, each side's misunderstandings. For a moment, both sides listened. For a moment, the wind carried his voice without interruption. For a moment, peace felt possible. But peace never lasted long in a world that was changing too quickly. More settlers arrived. More land was taken. More tribes were pushed aside. Conflict rose like storm clouds, gathering over plains James once called home. Still, he rode on, even as age began to catch him, even as his hair turned gray, even as the mountains felt steeper and the nights colder. One winter, he traveled to Colorado, where miners and soldiers needed an experienced scout. The land there was rough, icy, and unpredictable. Rivers froze. Winds whipped through canyons like knives. Most men feared the winter roads, but not James. He rode ahead of the group, studying the sky, the snow, the shape of the land. He guided them safely through storms that could have swallowed entire wagon trains. The younger men watched him with amazement. How does he know the way? They whispered. James only smiled. I listen to the land, he said. It speaks to those who respect it. But even the strongest warrior eventually feels the weight of time. One evening, after returning from a long scouting mission, James felt a deep exhaustion settle into his bones. He sat by the fire, staring at the flames, remembering his life, the battles, the hunts, the journeys, the Crow village, the mountains, the open sky. A fellow scout sat beside him. You've lived a wild life, the man said. James nodded. I've lived many lives, he replied softly. In the spring of 1866, James joined one final mission acting as a guide and interpreter. During tense negotiations between the U.S. Army and the Crow, it was a painful task. The Crow remembered him as a brother, a warrior, a leader. Seeing him ride with the soldiers brought mixed emotions. But James came not to fight. He came to help them understand each other, to give both sides a chance at peace. When the meeting ended, the soldiers prepared to leave. James rode with them, guiding them across familiar lands. But the journey was long and demanding. Cold nights and harsh weather wore on him. One morning, after breaking camp near the foothills, James complained of dizziness. His breath was shallow, his movements slow. The soldiers helped him to a resting place, but his condition worsened quickly. They knew he needed medical care. They took him to a nearby Crow camp, the very people he once called family. The Crow recognized him instantly. Their faces softened, filled with memories and respect. They laid him in a warm lodge, wrapped him in blankets, and tended to him with care. Elders whispered prayers. Warriors stood silent outside. Women prepared healing herbs. They did everything they could. But James' body was tired. His strength had carried him far farther than most men ever dreamed. Now it was fading. Over the next hours, his breathing slowed. His eyes softened. He looked peaceful, as if watching the plains he loved one last time. Some say he spoke a final, quiet sentence. I am home. He passed away, surrounded by the people who had once taken him in as a stranger, and later honored him as a brother. What happened next is debated. Some say the Crow gave him a warrior's burial. Others say he was laid to rest near Denver. But all agree on one thing. They honored him. Because James Beckwourth was not just a man. He was a story alive, powerful, unforgettable. A story that began in bondage, thrived in bravery, and ended in legend. The life of James Beckwourth did not fade when his heartbeat stopped. In many ways, it grew brighter. The people who knew him, soldiers, settlers, traders, and especially the Crow, held his memory like a flame that could not be extinguished by time, distance, or change. After his death, stories of his life began to travel farther than he ever had. They moved through the plains, rode across mountains, crossed ocean waters, and spread into cities and towns around the world. Some stories came from his own book, others from his friends, and many from people who had sat by his campfire, listening to him speak with a voice shaped by experience, pain, courage, and hope. People talked about him in saloons, in army camps, in schoolrooms, and around kitchen tables. Children grew up hearing stories of the man who had once been a slave and became a war chief. Adults admired the scout who could read the land like a map written by the wind. Travelers remembered the guide who saved them from dangerous mountain paths. But among all the places, James left a mark. The Crow Nation remembered him with the deepest respect to them. He was never just a mountain man, or a scout, or a storyteller. He was family. They remembered the brave young man who fought beside them. They remembered the leader who protected their people. They remembered the brother who shared their lives, their battles, their joys, and their losses. James had lived many identities, but none were as meaningful as the one given to him by the Crow warrior. Looking back on James, Beckwourth's life is like looking at several lives woven into one in his first life. He was born into slavery, into chains he had no choice over. Yet even then, he held a fire inside, refusing to be broken by a world that tried to decide his worth for him. In his second life, he was a mountain man exploring the wilderness, surviving freezing nights, climbing impossible ridges, and learning the secrets of nature. He became a man shaped by storms and sharpened by the rough beauty of the frontier. In his third life, he became a Crow, warrior adopted, trusted, and eventually honored as a war chief. He stood with them in danger, protected them in hardship, and loved them as his own people. In his fourth life, he became an explorer and pathfinder, discovering Beckwourth Pass and opening the way for thousands of settlers who followed the call of gold and opportunity. In his fifth life, he became a storyteller, sharing his experiences with honesty and power, giving the world a rare glimpse into the realities of the Wild West. Few people in history lived even one life as full as his. James Beckwourth lived 5. When James was a young man, the American West was wild and open. Herds of buffalo stretched across the plains like living rivers. Native tribes moved with the seasons, guided by tradition and the rhythm of nature. The mountains felt untouched, timeless, eternal. But by the time James passed away, everything had changed. The buffalo were disappearing. The land was being cut into borders and towns. The tribes he loved were being pushed aside by a growing nation. James, who had walked through every part of the wilderness, understood its beauty and its pain. He knew the West as it once was, and he saw the West it was becoming. His life became something precious, a bridge between two worlds, a reminder of what was lost, and a lesson for the future. Some people argue about James Beckwourth's stories. They say he exaggerated, added drama, or told tales taller than the mountains he climbed out. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but the truth is simple. When a man has lived so much, his life naturally sounds like a legend. Even if you stripped away every story, every rumor, every piece of folklore, James Beckwourth's real life would still stand as one of the most extraordinary stories in American history. He broke barriers. He rose from impossible beginnings. He carved his place in a world that often refused to accept men like him, and he did it with bravery, intelligence, and a deep respect for the people who welcomed him. Today, James Beckwourth's name remains in the mountains he crossed. Biography Pass still carries travelers into California. A town in Colorado bears his name. His stories are taught in classrooms, shared in documentaries, and written in history books. But his true legacy isn't found on a map or in a book. It's found in the lessons he left behind. Courage can rise from unexpected places. Freedom is a path that must be walked with strength. A man's worth is not determined by his birth, but by his heart. James lived through pain, loss, war, love, and adventure. He followed the land. He followed destiny. And in the end, he became something greater than any title could describe. Not just a mountain man, not just a war chief, not just a scout or storyteller. He became a symbol, a reminder of the untamed spirit of the American West, a reminder that even in the harshest worlds, a person can rise, transform, and leave behind a story that echoes forever. If someone stood at Beckwourth Pass today and looked toward the horizon, they would see the same mountains James once crossed, the same sky he once watched, the same wind he once felt on his face, and if they listened closely, they might hear his voice carried in the breeze, the voice of a man who refused to be limited, refused to be forgotten, and refused to live a small life. James P. Beckwourth lived boldly. He lived bravely. He lived fully, and his legend will live as long as stories are told.